and I asked, I said, when did the cartels start trafficking people as well as drugs? You know, when did it stop that someone could just not cross without paying some type of fee, cross into America? And I was told that was about 2018. And now, you know, it was explained to me that the smugglers are really the transportation. And then the traffickers are there, you know, kind of getting a fee for you to cross. And one of the most interesting things that was when we were at the water district in McAllen was that you are already in America before the wall.
Mm-hmm. Right. The wall was not actually on the border right there. Correct.
Exactly. That was what you asked me. One of the things that I learned was it's set back.
Yep.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. You know, we're going to talk about the issue that all of America is talking about, and that's immigration and the border and border security, because obviously the Biden administration has not done a good job of border security. And so we've got a series this week that you'll enjoy on immigration. And we've got some folks who visited as well as some experts on immigration. So thank you for joining us. Now, when you hear someone talk about the border, what image comes to mind? And where did that image come from? For most of the country, we hear about what's happening on the border from the news, or we see it on social media, as well as hearing lawmakers talk about what should be done to fix the problem. Well, breaking through the noise of the news headlines and the back and forth between lawmakers, what is it really like for people that live and work in a border town? What's it like for people coming across the border? Well, Americans for Prosperity Foundation has been taking people from across the country to different sections of the southern border for the past year and let them see for themselves what it's like, and to hear from people that live and work there. Well, last April and May, I was able to go on two of the border trips. The first one was to McAllen, Texas, and the second to Yuma, Arizona. And what I found there was shocking, saddening, and alarming, to be quite honest with you. And as Americans for Prosperity Foundation is taking another group to the border this week, we wanted to take the time and highlight this issue. So we'll have three separate discussions, as I said, about our first one will be with someone who attended the border trips this past February. The following episode will be with Chief Clem, who we had on the podcast last year, and getting an update from him. And then, of course, Daniel Garza, who is the president of the Libre Initiative and who lives on the border in McAllen, Texas. I want to welcome our first guest in this immigration series, Anne Buford, to the podcast. Anne, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Yeah. So first and foremost, why did you decide to go on the border trip?
Because I believe that I'm an experiential learner, and I believe that you only really know someone by seeing or something by seeing it yourself. You know, I don't do social media because I don't have a tendency to believe everything that I read. I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. And I watch a lot of different points of view on television. And I read a lot of points of view, but unless I see it for myself, I don't know the situation. And I'm not a policy person. I'm a normal person who's interested in immigration policy. And I'm also interested in security for America because I lived in New York City on 9/11.
Yeah. Was this your first time ever visiting the border, or had you been down there before?
It was my first time ever visiting the border. I'd only been to Mexico last year for the first time. And I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, where I live now. And I lived in New York for 30 years. And so Mexico was never kind of on my trip. And I have a brother who lives in San Antonio. So a lot of times when I go to Texas, I go to San Antonio. And when I told him I was going to McAllen, he was like, "You're going way down there."
Right. Yeah. Did you, now you talked about living in New York. You were living in New York on September 11th.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. And obviously that probably shapes your view of national security and why it's important to, make sure that we do have border security so that we can make sure we know who's coming in and out of the country. But your thoughts on that, how did that shape your view of America and maybe our immigration policy?
Well, I think, I will never forget, I was working at a publicly traded fashion company, and the president of the company was in Canada, and I remember him calling, and I don't think people could imagine that the Twin Towers had fallen. It was a beautiful day in New York. I was getting to the office. It was like 7:30 in the morning, and it was like a crisp fall day, and it was bright and sunny, and I went in the office, and I was head of communications, so at that point, I had a television in my office, which wasn't it was 2001. So that, that there weren't a lot of TVs around offices at that point. And so, just as the day unfolded, and I'm like a hardy Midwesterner, so I didn't leave the office. I stayed there because I needed to be there. And I remember walking home, and at that point I lived on the 35th floor of a building, which of course, my mom was calling everybody she knew to get me out of that building and down to stay with a friend. But I remember hearing fighter jets flying around New York City, because at that point, all the bridges were closed. You couldn't leave New York City. You couldn't get into New York City. And it was kind of even that day, but just what unfolded after that. And, I remember waking up on October 7th, 2023, and seeing what was going on in Israel, and thinking, This is a wake-up call for America. We should be lucky that it's not us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think in many ways, October 7th was Israel's September 11th, for sure. So did that whole experience have some kind of impact on how you think of maybe border security and how important it is? I think for many Americans prior to September 11th, that was just something people kind of took for granted, that we would not be attacked. Like, we just aren't used to that in the United States of America.
Probably. I'm sure it did to some degree. I had never really thought about it that way.
Right.
We grew up in the Midwest. I moved to New York City when I was 21. I always found New York to be very safe. New York isn't so safe these days. And I think something smart that the governors did was to send the buses to New York City, because it's bringing the border to a place that could only hear about it before.
Sure.
And the impact in New York City is intense. I was there over Christmas, and the loitering that you see around Grand Central Station, I was actually there before Christmas, after Thanksgiving. And so the loitering of people that you see around the Hotel Roosevelt, which is right in the heart. It was where my first office when I worked for Vogue magazine was. It's like right there. And so it's right by Grand Central Station. So it's not like it's anywhere other than right in the middle of everything in New York City. And I think that's a savvy move by governors who are dealing with this. And it's awful for New Yorkers.
Right.
And for New York coming back from from COVID.
Right. Right. Now, before you went on this trip with Americans for Prosperity Foundation to McAllen, Texas, what were your thoughts about the border? I mean, obviously, it's just something that people see on TV, and until you go down and experience it, it seems very different. As I said, I've been on 2 trips, and it's very different than I ever expected it to be. But what were your thoughts before you ever went about the border? Well,
it never sounded to me, I'm from a family of entrepreneurs, so it never sounded to me like there was one cohesive thought. An entrepreneur, they make a mistake. Hopefully, if they're going to be a good entrepreneur, they learn from their mistake. And you had heard that there was the Bush wall, the Trump wall, the Biden wall. in Kansas, we've had, migrants who come to Kansas to work. And that was when I was a child. We had a ranch and we had two Mexican gentlemen who lived on the ranch and worked on the ranch. So my thought had been, like, America in most places is never a third world country. People like to say it's third world. They have not been to a third world country. I imagined it to be much more rural than McAllen was when I arrived there. I really didn't know what to expect. I had been to Israel, so I'd seen the wall that separates Israel and some of the Palestine territory or the Palestinian territory, whether it's Gaza. I can't really remember where it was in Jerusalem where I saw it. So I'd seen large walls, but I had never seen these walls or really understood the dynamics of the wall or the topography or of the specific wall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. And what did you hope to learn when you decided to take the trip? What did you hope to learn, I guess, going down there?
As someone who's a visual learner and I'm a filmmaker, I think visually looking at things for yourself, you can tell your own story. You can talk to people who are there. On the trip, you meet different people with different backgrounds. I sat next to a gentleman who was a Michigan state senator who was on the trip. And so to hear his perspective and, you learn other people's, Daniel Garza, his perspective, Chief Clem, who is amazing and so informative. And so I think being informed by Chief Clem, who has been or was a border patrol officer for 27 years, is where you learn so much because they're law enforcement officers. They're not politicians. They're not all the stuff that their job begins to encompass is unbelievable. And to me, they're the people that should be telling us as Americans, they should be giving us best practices, what worked, what didn't work. They're not about which president was, I think he's been through Obama, Clinton, Trump, and Biden. Mm-hmm. And so they're not there picking political winners and losers. They're trying to keep America safe, right? They started as law enforcement officers. And at one point, Chief Clem was describing to me all that they do, and they basically have become processing agents. Mm-hmm. And my words, he did not say this, but he said, and we do their laundry. And I was like, you do their laundry?
Right.
It's a laundromat. It's like a cafeteria. It's a, bed and breakfast, and those are all my words. No one said that, but the way that the people crossing are treated is really exceptional by people that have not been trained in hospitality.
Yeah. To me, that was one of the most stunning things, right, is that the role of the U.S. Border Patrol has changed through the years because we now have an administration that doesn't really want to enforce the law. And so people, it used to be people were being apprehended by Border Patrol, and now they're just walking up and turning themselves in. And, I'm sure you heard stories of this, but several Border Patrol agents who I met with talked about, packing their lunch for the day and then ending up not eating it and having to give it to some family with young kids who probably hasn't eaten in 5 or 6 days once they come across them, because that's just the father in them or the mother in them kicks in, and that's what they do. But it seems like it's a very different job than it was even 5 years ago. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And I said, when did the cartels start trafficking people as well as drugs?
Yeah.
When did it stop that someone could just not cross without paying some type of fee to cross into America? And I was told that was about 2018. Mm-hmm. And now, it was explained to me that the smugglers are really the transportation. And then the traffickers are there, kind of getting a fee for you to cross. And one of the most interesting things that was when we were at the water district in McAllen.
Yes.
Was that you are already in America before the wall.
Mm-hmm. Right. The wall was not actually on the border right there. Correct.
Exactly. That was what you asked me. One of the things that I learned was it's set back.
Yep. Right.
And I guess in Arizona, and you've been to Yuma, so you probably understand this. It's more on the border, the actual border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's based on terrain and where they can, there's some places they just can't build a wall because you got water there or you got whatever reason. Yeah. And it's a lot different than I would have thought. Let me ask you, did you see any of the fence that was there rotting? Cause I saw that and I was shocked by it. The Trump administration purchased wall to be put up and then it just sat there and the Biden administration never put it up and started selling it off for scrap. Did you see any of them?
Okay. I heard that there had been wall that had been purchased that had been being sold as scrap. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about it on the bus, but I don't recall ever seeing it.
Now, let me ask you, what did you see? It sounds like you went to the water district. Talk about the trip and kind of what the group got to see and hear while they were on this trip.
Okay. I think totally most shocking to me is McAllen is like any mid-sized town you've ever been in America. Mm-hmm. There's a Barnes and Noble. There is, every fast food place that exists. There's also, a lot of like commerce comes through every day, from the border. I think I was most shocked that I saw a Maserati dealership.
Oh, you did? I didn't see the
I did.
Maserati dealership.
I said I was like, did anyone see the Maserati dealership? Because, I would not imagine that there would be a Maserati dealership in McAllen, Texas.
Yeah.
And on the morning, when I was watching the local television station, the first morning I was there, one of the ads was for the largest GMC truck dealer in Texas. That was in McAllen. So that really shocked me too, right? Texans buy a lot of trucks. Yeah. So a lot of big towns in Texas, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin.
Yeah.
And so a lot of trucks and Maseratis are going back to Mexico. I would think. I did not see any Maseratis on the ground.
Yeah.
Driving on the street.
Right.
So, but you talk about, this, so there was that angle. I think just seeing where people cross, we didn't actually see any people cross, but, seeing the water district area, I think it's really shocking when it occurs to you that people are in America before they ever hit the wall. And then there are all these various degrees of wall heights. It's almost like watching like a step ladder. Mm-hmm. And then where there's water. And then I think truly shocking was that there is an RV park literally right across from the one of the parts of the wall. And they were telling me that Canadian snowbirds come and set up their RV when it's cold in Canada.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So safety doesn't seem to be an issue. And I was told that everybody carries a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons why it's safe. But so, I wasn't aware that Canadians are using McAllen as a winter destination. I'd heard of Florida, Palm Beach,
right.
Boca, Sarasota, but I did not know that McAllen was one of them.
Right.
So there is this juxtaposition of weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, Chief Clem does a great job of going through and explaining kind of all of his ideas on what there needs to be a safe border as far as technology, boats, steel. He talks he talks at length about, and I'm sure he'll describe that when you speak with him, but it is really enlightening to understand kind of like the three types of people crossing that there are. The ways that, they have the getaways that they call them, how the cartels kind of work the system to bait and switch the Border Patrol agents, right? They have a big group of people crossing. It diverts their attention. And then nefarious things are going on down the way. And I think that's one of the things that most affected me, or that I felt most, is the cartels are stepping in because they can, because they're allowed to. Mm-hmm. When there's nothing done, the nefarious things can take place.
Yeah. In other words, the administration has the ability to take action there, but because we choose not to, the cartels are filling a void that's left there, and they're exploiting it and making money off of it. And is that what you mean? Yeah.
Like whether it's trafficking people, whether it's trafficking drugs. We were told that, like in the 24-hour period that we were there, for the first 24 hours, that in Austin, Houston, and San Antonio, there were 3,000 online posts trafficking women.
Wow.
So if you're not looking for trouble, you're not going to find it. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking for the opportunity to exploit a woman to find drugs, you can find it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the saddest things I found, frankly, was the trafficking that's going on. And that's going on because America's allowing it to go on, because this administration is allowing that to go on. And for us to do that, that's, I mean, a shame is not even the right word. It's just, it's unforgivable that our government allows that to go on and kind of turns a blind eye to it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. And I don't actually look at it as a Democrat, Republican, this is an American problem. And when I was there, the bill had just been set aside. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how you look a gift horse in the mouth. And I'm not saying that what's going on. I think Chief Klim can speak better to what this administration is doing that is causing more problems, because I basically have his notes, right? Mm-hmm. And I can give you back what he can articulately tell you and back up. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it makes sense. I mean, the not having deportations the first 100 days of office allowed people to come in, right? You're not getting deported, so come on in. The whole problem with ICE is lunacy. Where the Border Patrol agents, they get people, they process them, they feed them, they do their testing to process them into the system. Then they're supposed to hand them over to ICE, right? Mm-hmm. But they can't, because ICE is full. And the supply chain problem, right? Any business person would look at that as a supply chain problem.
Yeah.
So therefore, they go over, and it's organizations like Catholic Charities then take the people, and they have a certain amount of time that they can keep them and help them transition, which is all paid for by the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. So the redundancy of helping the person and they're going to be in America. And in 2024, the people entering now, they're not going to get to go before any judiciary until 2031. Mm-hmm. So, they're not going to be able to work legally, right? If you want to come and you want to work hard, in order for America to meet our GDP, we need workers. And so even for the people who are trying to do things right? With, there was a gentleman there who runs a peach farm, and he gave a presentation on H-2A and H-2B visas.
Okay.
And it was a program created by Congress, and entrepreneurs trying to run their business, it helps them legally bring in migrant workers for a certain amount of period of time. And then they return home when the season's over. Mm-hmm. And the amount of legislation and costs that have been like layered and layered and layered on these hardworking farmers is basically killing their business. 40% of their costs are going to their labor.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have peaches can be not good one year. And it's already hard to make a living.
Right.
So, it was a man named Chalmers Carr from Titan Farms who spoke to us. And that was fascinating. So in addition to the security problems, you've got the policies that are dumping on people trying to do it the right way. And the people coming over to work on a temporary basis are being paid $19 and $20 and $25 an hour. And Americans, right. they post the jobs for Americans, and the Americans don't want those jobs. One woman from California said after they posted the job, they had one person call. So it's not jobs right. that Americans want. It's other existing jobs. And for every person who comes over and does these temporary jobs, that creates jobs for Americans down the supply chain. Whether it's, whether it's in like Caterpillar and, John Deere or in the food chain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think most people learned that, we used to have a program called the Maserati program where day workers could come over and cross and we had a better ability to do that for jobs that people just didn't want to do in the United States, but they actually came over and then went back over the border that night. And they lived in Mexico and they came over and worked in the fields. And I think everybody agrees that there should be some ability for folks to do that. But the problem right now is that the border is completely broken. I mean, to me, the idea that quite frankly, this administration has just kind of thrown their hands up and said, we'll just let it be, we're just going to let the system be broken. And I mean, I think that is ultimately what frustrates the Border Patrol agents, right? The ones I felt there, it seemed like their morale was I wouldn't say an all-time low because I don't know how to judge all time, but it was pretty low because I think this administration, kind of made them the bad guy with the horse whipping stuff that they kind of threw on them and some other things. But I think they feel that their hands are tied. They want to control the border. They want to secure the border, but they're not being allowed to by politicians. You agree with that?
Oh, completely. And I think that's another problem that you have when people are hired for a certain job and
right.
then inaction causes them to have to expand their abilities
right.
without proper advocacy or input, right? They need to give input into what's going on.
Yeah, right.
And, one of the things that I found and most super interesting was Alejandro Mayorkas has been kind of in the whole space of this since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you look at issues, you look at people who have been around. Chief Clem speaks to a lot, right? If you're going to have a successful business, you have a successful culture where you support your agents and, and not blow smoke at them.
Mm-hmm.
And, I thought it was super interesting to hear, what you talk about national security.
Right.
And this is what scared me was because I hadn't heard this and is, the excessively high demographic of one country's citizens coming to America is from China.
Right. Yep.
And it's male and they don't speak English and they don't give any kind of indication for why they're here. And I guess they're very stoic. And Chief Clem said, a lot of times when you bring people in, no matter where they're from, whether they're from Ukraine or Haiti or any place, and you take their clothes, you give them something to wear, you wash their clothes, you give them food, you give them a place to sleep. He said, that loosens people up. And he said, these Chinese men never show any sign of emotion, which I think is scary.
Sure. Well, what's scary is that we don't know who's coming across the border. Like, we should know who is coming across the border, especially you talked about being in New York on September 11th. Would have been good to know who those people were who came across and attacked us. And that's all it takes is a few people to slip across the border. I mean, this is a national security issue. I don't think there's any question about it. Let me ask you, we've just got a few minutes left here, but Chief Clem, he spoke to the group and kind of went around with you and toured. What did he say that sort of changed your view? And I guess overall, how was your view of the border changed after the trip as opposed to before the trip?
Oh my God. Chief Clem made fun of me. I took so many notes.
Yeah.
Because everything he said to me changed my view of the border. First of all, way down there is a thriving economic community of people passing back and forth from Mexico to Texas legally.
Right.
And so he did say, I didn't know this, but Mexicans, if they're caught, are returned that day. He said that Mexico has not provided the same amount of help from their National Guard that they did before. Mm-hmm. Mexico has been good at helping the migrant caravans. So that was a positive. Eliminating ICE detention, stop deterrence. Said everything that was ever input to stop deterrence has now gone backward.
Right.
The no deportation for the first 100 days, the closing the loopholes on asylum, that needs to be done.
Right.
You're meant to seek asylum in the first country, but you don't.
That's right.
And there should be a stay in Mexico policy.
Yes. Right.
And the consequences for breaking the law is a big deterrent. And if you don't have to go before a judge until 2031, there is no deterrent.
That's right. Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. The system is truly broken, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and one of the co-founders of Home Depot said last week, no one's lining up to try to get into China. No one's lining up trying to get into Russia. And everybody wants to come here because America is the land of opportunity, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And it's not a third world country. And, we are now the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah. Right.
And so I don't care if you're, a Republican or a Democrat. I would appreciate this being handled because it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most Americans are fed up with what's happening at the border, and they know that it's the fact that the government is choosing not to fix the problem. It's not that they can't fix the problem. We're America. We can fix the problem. It's that our politicians are choosing not to fix the problem right now. And that's very frustrating to Democrats, to unaffiliated voters, and to Republican voters. And I think the American people are trying to demand that they do better. Our leaders do better. Final question. What would you tell someone who's never been to the border? What would you tell them?
Go. Drive down, whether you're in California, you're in, Texas, Arizona, there's, the Canadian borders. If you can go, drive down and go, because I would take kids. It's a great learning experience. It's nothing like you imagine. The people who do the work, we need more Border Patrol officers. I know they're law enforcement officers, really, they do so many other hats and I think appreciate them. One of the things that I didn't know was that in Uvalde, it was the Border Patrol agents who finally went in.
To the school. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, and like, so security means something to them. They're willing to take action, right? When no one else is taking action, they took action. But you have to allow them to take action and not, a single shot of a picture doesn't encapsulate everything that's going on, right?
Right.
And I would be upset too if somebody like showed me screaming at a bunch of kids who were playing tennis and I had my tennis racket and I was like doing that because it looked like I was like chasing the kids with my tennis racket, but that wouldn't be the case. I was just yelling at them and telling them I was serious.
Right.
I don't have kids, so that was the only thing I could think about that was like put on me. But you know what I'm saying? They need to be better supported. Their culture, they need to be listened to, like anything that's done in Washington without talking to people on the ground is dumb.
Yeah.
It's like, and I can't tell you in one visit everything that should be done because I've only been there.
Right.
Once.
Right.
But I can tell you to talk to Chief Clem. I can tell you to talk to Daniel Garza. And when they first asked me to do this, I was like, why do they want me to do this? I'm not a policy person, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I really I know enough about it to be dangerous and to advocate for people going and to try to be helpful if I can.
Yeah. Well, but that's the point of these trips is to bring citizens down to see it, to become more educated on the effort. And it sounds like you were. And so I thank you, Anne, for your time and for your visit, taking the time to go down to the border and learning more about it. And again, this will be a great series with you and Chief Clem and Daniel Garza this week on the podcast. So, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I can't wait to hear what Daniel and Chief Clem say. And I appreciate you allowing me to talk. I hope I made some sense because it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And, going down there, you really do learn a lot. But thank you, Anne. Appreciate it. Well, listen, this is going to be a great series talking about the issue that the American people want to talk about, and it's immigration and border security. And I think if there's one thing that Anne and I were talking about, it shouldn't be the politicians making all the decisions here. It should be the experts. It should be the citizens ultimately driving where America ends up on these issues. And ultimately, they should be listening to people who are on the ground doing the job, the U.S. Border Patrol, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. But it's the rank and file folks who know the answers. They know how to fix this. It's not the politicians. Thank you for joining us. Again, liberty and freedom, they're easily taken for granted. Don't take that for granted. Go out there, defend liberty, defend freedom. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.